Welcome to episode 142 of the Half Point Per podcast. I'm your host, Evan Riggs, joined as always by my co-host, Dalton Willie, and producer, Johnny Pham. Guys, how are you doing on this rare Tuesday pod?
We are 10 and a half weeks away from football. And if you just count Thursday, we're basically 10 weeks away. So we're there. I'm ready for it. I was born ready for it.
I mean, we still have the whole NBA offseason, NBA draft tomorrow. We have the Olympics, we have Wimbledon. We've got a lot of ground to cover before football. You're in a completely different headspace than I am at this point still.
None of that matters to me.
Johnny, how you doing
You
tonight?
just,
I know.
you just don't love ball.
Yeah.
I
Dalton's
love singular ball,
the ball can't be round for Dalton. That's the issue.
torpedo ball.
John, I know you're fresh off of a wicked round of golf. How you doing tonight?
Nice, fresh, crispy 46. Ended on a par. Vibes are high. I feel great. Happy to be here. Would love Dalton just to speak up, and that's all I can ask for.
So vibes are high. We've got a good one coming tonight. As you can see in the thumbnail, if you're on there, if you're on the podcast app, you see this is the first mock draft show of the season. I feel like usually we have already done one of these by this point of the summer. Maybe not, but at any rate, we've talked about ranks the last 2 weeks. If you want to hear us talk about more players than who we actually draft in the show, go back, listen to, I believe it was quarterback and receiver 2 weeks ago, and running back and tight end ranks. Last week, we talked about guys we differed on ADP on. Now we're gonna kind of put that into work tonight and do a little mock draft. But first, we've got players we're afraid we're wrong about. Dalton and I each brought a couple guys that, like I said, we have discussed them in ranks the last 2 weeks. Who are we actually not feeling super great about as far as that goes? And we've got a sell me the pen, which for those of you who have been here last 2 weeks, Dalton has attempted to sell us the pen. He has not done it quite in the format that I thought it was going to be. So I'm going to take it over tonight, kind of see what happens, see where it goes. But, from Wolf of Wall Street, gotta try and sell somebody, basically the stock of some player. We've got a fun one, guys. Anything before we get started here?
Well, let's see you sell this pen if you're so good at it, Mr.
All right.
Riggs.
Yep. Let's do it.
Sell me this pen. Sell me this pen.
So there's no mystery about who I'm talking about here. I'm going to tell you right off the rip. This is Ramondre Stevenson. I'm trying to sell Ramondre Stevenson to you as a top 12 running back this year. Now, I know I don't have him ranked there. Dalton doesn't have him ranked there. So this isn't me saying I'm changing my prediction to that, but this is me selling that you buy now at his price, and you potentially have a top 12 running back by season's end. So entering last season, Ramondre was drafted as the RB11. He obviously had a rough year, finished as the RB33. And when that happens, it seems like almost no matter what, that player, like it's almost an unwritten rule that he cannot be drafted or ranked as high as where he was the year before if he let us down. I mean, we all know fantasy football, very emotional game, very easy to get upset with players who torpedoed your season. And not only did Ramondre have kind of an uneven start to the year, he missed the last 4 weeks of the season, so he literally was not there for you in the fantasy playoffs. So I understand the harsh feelings. But you look back to 2022, this was the RB10 in almost as bad of an offense. Like that offense in 2022, Mac Jones almost got to 3,000 passing yards. He had 14 passing touchdowns, 11 interceptions. There was obviously no Zeke to take the red zone touches that year like there was last year. There is no Zeke this year to do that. Like Jacoby Myers had 800 yards that led the team. You look at this year, Drake May, Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas, Juju, KJ Osborne, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker. Like, that's just a lot of okay guys, but I think the combination of that and Cleveland Browns offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt, who had a big hand in making Joe Flacco look very good at the end of last season and, was getting by with Deshaun Watson and no Nick Chubb. Like, I think this offense goes from one of the worst I've seen in the last 5 years to just normal levels of bad to below average, which I think would be a big deal for Ramondre, who just did not have a chance. It was one of those situations like Josh Jacobs where it's just getting tackled in the backfield consistently. The volume was there. It was all of the games where the guy averaged 2.5 yards per carry. There were a lot of like 14 for 32 type of games that just looked really ugly. He still averaged almost 11 points per game, and if you take away the game he left early with an injury, it was a little over 11. So I'm not saying this is for sure going to happen, but if there's a guy in that like RB 18 to 24 range that I think by week 4 could be being ranked as the RB 10, I think this is my number one candidate for that. What do you guys think?
Over Tajay Spears.
Yeah.
Blasphemous. Yeah, I can't buy him at a top 12 finish price. I see the vision. I guess I would probably feel more
Well,
confident.
I'm not asking you to buy at that price. You're buying at his price right now. I'm asking you to believe in the vision down the line.
I mean, this New England Patriots team might be the worst skill group in the AFC. And that is concerning about what defenses can do. I might feel a little more confident if I knew for a fact it was Jacoby Brissett for 17 games. But with the impending Drake May starts and not knowing what that'll look like, I don't know if I can trust this offense to move the ball.
Johnny?
Yeah, I don't think he'd be RB12 with that bad of a team. I think you sold it well. I think this is a great segment and how it should go.
See, that was my main goal. I just wanted to do this how I thought Sell the Pim was supposed to work.
So, John, are you buying the segment?
I am buying the idea of the pitch that Evan proposed. But I purely can't buy the pen because the Patriots are going to be so bad.
But he was the RB10, and they were very, very bad when he did that too. So I think there is a world where the team is bad. Like there are not when you get to RB19, RB20, which is where he's going, you kind of start running out of workhorse guys, and the guys that are potential workhorses are not as talented. This is a mix of talent and workhorse. The team just sucks ass. So like if that is just if that just is a little bit better, like this potentially could be a lot better than the ADP, than where we both have him ranked.
It could be a lot better, but we've seen a lot of teams with talented running backs hurt those running backs' potential, and it's not like we're talking Breece Hall level talent, unfortunately for Ramondre.
Okay, fair enough. I thought it was worth a shot. Give it my best try. All right, Dalton. Players that we are worried we could be wrong about. I will let you lead this off. I have 2. I think you have like 7. You're only going to give a couple though, so lead off with your 2 best ones.
Yeah, I'll give you my top one, and this might be a repeat for you, so let me know. But it's George Pickens.
No.
Okay.
I am unconcerned where I have him ranked.
That is funny. So the first thing when you look at George Pickens' profile is that the Steelers got an upgrade at offensive coordinator and QB. I understand that those upgrades are going from like a 1999 Honda Civic to like a 2008 Honda Civic, but it's an upgrade and it's going to work out for him in that sense. To give you an idea of how bad it was last year, he had the 32nd ranked quarterback in yards per pass attempt under Cinder at 6.4 yards. Yet he still led the league in yards per catch at 18.1. So there's definitely boom upside. We saw that in his week 17 game where he went off for 33 points and really inflated him from like the wide receiver 35 to like the wide receiver 27 in the season. And then I look at what Russ did with Sutton last year, and I think we can both agree that George Pickens is probably a better wide receiver than Cortland Sutton. But through 15 games last year, Sutton had 10 touchdowns. And through week 15, he was the wide receiver 19. And then he didn't play a few weeks. What I will say is that the George Pickens archetype and the Russell Wilson archetype fit really well together, which is like I'm going to throw you the most difficult catch you can imagine, and you're going to make it or not. And he was also fourth in the league last year in yards per target. Now, that number is pretty inflated from the Browns game I mentioned earlier, where he had two like 70-yard touchdowns.
Yeah.
But that also gives you like a potential upside on what he can do. And if the Russ to Sutton connection worked, I think the Russ to Pickens connection could work a lot better. And when you just factor in the rest of this wide receiver room, I could see like monster target upside games where he may be inefficient, but he really just needs one to connect to like win you weeks with like an 80-yard touchdown or even just like a 60-yard bomb.
Yeah, I think theoretically the situation, he should be a high target guy. He hasn't really shown the skill set to like. I know Deontay Johnson was there, but even remove that, he just hasn't shown the skill set and mainly the consistency to prove to me that he actually will be a high target guy week in week out. I mean, he is definitely like you said, his skill set does pair well with Russell Wilson. I'm not sure. Like, I think he's better than Courtland Sutton. I'm not sure it's that big a difference. And I also would not be floored if like Calvin Austin is kind of a thing this year for that exact Russell Wilson vertical game type of reason. So I understand the pro George Pickens side right now. It's just I still think that he's kind of one of those guys where he hasn't proven to me that he can scale up yet. And so I just have my doubts as far as role.
Yeah, and I think my concern is if he hits, he probably really hits.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's a world where George Pickens is an efficient, like, intermediate receiver and ends up as, like, the wide receiver 23. It's going to be, like, weeks 1 through 6, we suddenly have George Pickens breakouts. It would be reminiscent of, like, what Will Fuller did for a season where you're like, wow.
Yeah, and like for me, Pickens, he will finish higher than where I have him ranked. I still am totally good with where I'm drafting him, though, if that makes sense. Like I'm still totally good with what I think my price should be for him, even though I know his end of the season number by his name will probably be higher than that.
I think it's going to be a roller coaster of a journey
Yep.
with his play style and this offense. And so I agree with that. There's probably a better argument to be made in best ball for drafting him a little higher for those spike weeks. But I think in a redraft league, it's going to be frustrating to spot the starts that he's important in. And like last year, who was really starting George Pickens after 2 straight sub 10-point games, and then he blows up for you in the playoffs?
Yeah. Okay. My first one, I think, is going to surprise you. It's going to surprise anybody who's listened to this podcast for multiple years, I think.
This might be one of mine.
Oh, go ahead. Who do you think it is?
Is it a quarterback?
No.
Okay, then go ahead.
I have Joe Mixon. I have him at running back 12, and I'm a little afraid of, I don't want to say how high I am because I'm not much higher or even higher than consensus, I don't think. But I just have a little bit of heartburn having him this high. And it kind of this is probably the least important part of the argument, but I look at Dameon Pierce. I know he had a terrible year last year. He had a very good and efficient but good rookie season in a bad offense. And I think it's him and Samaje Perine as far as the two best backs that Mixon has played with. And you kind of combine that with he's changing teams. Maybe he's changing, like he had such a huge red zone share in Cincy that I just don't know if we can just pencil that in Houston as far as volume and just how they're going to use him down there, whatever the case may be. But also the main concern for me, and again, this guy was RB7 last year, 13.5 points per game. So he was good last year. There's not much sign of statistical decline, but you look at a team that wants to win the Super Bowl, decided they were better off cutting him and signing Zach Moss and saving about $3 million against the cap, which I know every dollar counts, especially when you have to pay your quarterback like the Bengals are. But that really, in the grand scheme of things, is not very much. So it makes me a little bit wary that the team that obviously knows him best, that wants to win, is like, you know what? We can just bring in this guy, which Zach Moss was good last year. So this isn't like a Zach Moss is bad argument, but I'm not totally sure if we're going to get quite the same Joe Mixon, who again, 1,400 yards, 12 touchdowns last year, but he was 5th in carries, 3rd in red zone touches. And like some of the other underlying stats, they've gone down a little bit, but not, a crazy amount. He's been up and down. He was 14th in evaded tackles 2 years ago at about 3.1 per game, 28th 2 years ago, or it was 14th in 2021, 28th in 2022, and that was only 1.9 per game. Or no, that was last year, sorry. 2021, he was 7th, and that was at 4.8 per game. So bottom line, he was evading a lot of tackles, went way down, and then came back up a little bit to about 3 a game last year. So, for forced missed tackles per touch, he was not in the top 12. I don't know where he's at because I'm not paying money for the site. But year 8 has traditionally been the year where running back performance kind of falls off. Year 7 to year 8, it's one of the biggest fall offs. I think this was Fantasy Points. I saw put this up, Ryan Heath. Year 7, a running back is at 97% of his baseline, like career points per game average. In year 8, he is at 73%. So you have, this is kind of when the fall off happens. He's changing teams, a little uncertain if the role will be quite the same. And I just have some concerns. And just like eye test wise, he's not quite the same physical specimen that he was 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, those are pretty valid concerns. He's at the age cliff too for running backs at age 27. It's hard.
And he'll be 28 when the season starts.
Yeah, definitely. He's right around Eckler age, which we saw. Obviously, there are other factors surrounding Eckler, like injury last year, but we saw that happen with Eckler after, what was he, RB1 the season before, RB2?
Probably.
And just a complete and total fall off. Part of the Joe Mixon, like, draftability right now, and it's a bad argument, is people are saying, well, who else? Like, Dameon Pierce was a complete non-factor to Devin Singletary, who we know is a Jag in the NFL. And I'd say the other concerning thing, I know there's no one else in the running back room, but like if Houston just goes nuclear with the pass rate, which looking at their weapons,
they should.
That they should.
And that was one of their biggest issues last year, is they ran the ball way too much.
Yeah. And if that happens, and I mean, I haven't looked at their depth chart. If you can tell me who their RB3 is, I'd love to hear it. But if they have somebody who's a better pass game specialist who can work in on those passing downs, then I feel like Mixon takes a pretty large hit, because
I mean, Daria Gumbawale, if he's going to get on the field, that would be the only way.
But again, I mean, looking at that depth chart between Dameon Pierce and him, it's hard to see the huge fall off with Dameon Pierce is because Bobby Slowick runs a scheme that is the antithesis to what Dameon Pierce does well. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think he's ever going to do well in that offense. So I know there's grumbles about Khalil Herbert getting cut or traded. This would be one of the teams, like if Herbert landed in Houston, I think Mixon would take a dive in my rankings.
Okay. Yeah, it's just tough because, again, that it was the team that just saw him was perfectly fine letting him walk and saving a little bit of money, but not a ton. And, if he would have gone to, I don't know, just like insert average NFL team here. Like if he would have gone to the Giants are a bad example. They're bad. Who else needed a running back this offseason? Like if he would have gone to Washington or like
the Chargers, how would you feel?
The Chargers, like he would be more like in the RB20 range. So
Raiders.
Yeah, well that would be probably more on the bad side, but but yeah. Okay, who's your second?
For anybody who's listened to the pod in a similar vein to Evan, this one's going to really surprise people because Evan and I have been consistently full-blown out, including on the hype train that surrounded this player last year. But it's Deshaun Watson. So
what? You think he might be good?
Well, I'm not even saying good, but Evan, we don't have him in our top 20. So like we're saying he's going to be like worse than Bryce Young in this upcoming season.
He was worse than Bryce Young when he played last year.
Well, that's the funny thing, because I was like, I'm going to look at this a little bit. So in his full game sample of games he played, I'm pulling out the game. He only played 10% of the snaps because he had negative 1.8 points. He didn't play a full game. And it's clear when you watch that game, he was not right. he averaged the same fantasy points as Mahomes at 18.34. His finishes in games he started and finished were QB 5, 27, 10, 30, 8, and 14. So it's a pretty wild ride for Deshaun Watson. So, but there's upside on it. I mean, there's top 5 QB performances in that, and they come with his rushing upside. So my concern starts there. Then, if you look all time, and this is from fantasy points, he's top 5 in quarterbacks all time in fantasy points per game, which the smart people tell me is a really correlative stat to like effective quarterback play. And I know he hasn't played football in basically 3 years now, and there's a lot that's going to go on in that time. But if Deshaun Watson is like QB 15, let's just say he's QB 15 on the season, there's a major discount on every single one of his weapons. Like Judy's in your top 60, but I think he's in your 50s. And
Yep.
Elijah Moore is completely unranked for both of us. Amari Cooper's low in the outside the wide receiver 2 range for both of us.
Mhm.
And both the running backs are in 45 plus for us.
Well,
And
if I knew Nick Chubb's leg was working properly, that would not
Yes.
be the case.
But if he is like an above average quarterback or even an average quarterback, this offense probably needs like an inflation in all of their values, which could just be a major marker we're missing. And like last year, Joe Flacco was a startable quarterback for the second half of the season. And if Deshaun Watson can do that, like where are we at? Their pass rate significantly increased with Joe Flacco, which concerns me that maybe he was just not right the entire season and that they could have a crazy pass rate this year and that Deshaun Watson's going to be an all right quarterback. And then we're just missing on all of their players.
We just haven't seen him be good for real life football since like 2021.
Yes.
And so it is I get what you're saying, and it's a good point to bring up that if and this isn't even the same this is not saying if he's 2021 Deshaun Watson. If he is average, like you said, then yes, it could potentially bring some other guys' draft stocks up who were too low on. And also, of course, he probably shouldn't be QB 30 anyway, like he is, I guess. But I think, at least from my perspective, and this is where he is ADP wise too, from my perspective, it's almost me saying, like, hey, don't even if I put him at QB 21, I feel like somebody will look at that and be like, you know what? I'm going to take a chance and draft him as my backup. And I'm just telling people, I just don't want you to do that. If he looks good through 2 weeks, then sure, pick him up. Like, that would be where I stand on Deshaun Watson.
Well, my concern is that if we're wrong on him, there's just a lot of players because I think that coaching staff in Cleveland is a good coaching staff and they do a good job at running a good offense. That if they end up being right,
You were not convinced when I said their offensive coordinator went to New England.
well, Alex Van Pelt, great. Head coaching staff there, much better. And at the end of the day, if they're good, they're going to be players on this team that nobody's talking about that we're all missing on. And I don't want to go back to the Elijah Moore hype train, but boy, I kind of want to go back to the Elijah Moore hype train.
Look, I'm just saying, like, when you actually go look at his game log, it looks a lot like Daniel Jones' game log the year that, yes, he himself was a pretty good fantasy quarterback. It's not quite that good, but like 200 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, like 154 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. And he just adds like 30, 40, 20 rushing yards here and there. Yeah, one
But that's
rushing
part
touchdown.
of his game. And
Yeah, but like the rushing, it was like 2-3 points a game, except for the one where he had a rushing touchdown.
But still, I mean, you're talking about the same point output in his 5-game sample as Mahomes.
Well, Mahomes also did not have a very good year last year, so that
That's
sounds better than it.
But that's
like,
good for QB 14.
Sure. Yeah, I just still don't really want any part of betting on that guy to be anything but bad because he just hasn't been from real life. Okay, the next guy, I mentioned the Giants, and I was pretty impassioned in my Malik Neighbors in the 30s rank, and as I've been thinking about it, I could definitely see where that could go wrong. A lot like the Ramondre Stevenson argument, where it's like if the situation ends up better than we think, which all the time this happens. Every year this happens. Like, this is different in that it's the receiver that, or it's it's the quarterback that's the issue. You think back to the Keenan Allen, obviously now Keenan Allen more established than Malik Neighbors, but remember when Keenan Allen was going like crazy low the year that Herbert was there and Tyrod Taylor was there. Like things, and obviously last year, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Year before that, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Like this could be if the situation turns out to actually be, they can get some semblance of that 2022 offense back to form, whether it's Daniel Jones finding his way combined with amazing coaching, or maybe it's Drew Lock comes in and has like just an okay season. Malik Neighbors, I still think, is far and away the best pass catcher in town. I don't even know if we knew that Darren Waller was for sure retired or not when we talked about him on the podcast. I lost track of the music video release date on that one. But like the volume's going to be there. And if the volume, like, and I said this on that pod, the volume will most likely be a lot of short stuff, but that won't be the player's fault. If the offense actually is capable of giving him more, he can do more. And he could easily be wide receiver 18 and make this look very foolish. And you've missed out on one of the rookies who could win you a league.
Yeah, I will have so much trouble getting on board with this one. Just distinctly on the Giants offense. Like their offensive line doesn't look like it's going to take a step forward, which is concerning for Daniel Jones. He looks like a war veteran who saw time on Normandy Beach in his pressers. And that's a major concern for me. And then
he's kind of always had that look on his face. He has like that glazed over look on his face all the time.
And my final concern is just they don't have anybody at this point to complement him at all. That I can see a lot of bracket coverage and people asking Darius Slayton, Rondell Robinson, and Daniel Bellinger to beat them. Like, I don't think any of those players have 1,000-yard season on their belt. No. Jalen Hyatt looks like he might be a good deep threat, and that's about it. It's just, I'm very concerned. I think I already sent you this tweet, but last week somebody said he could be a player to go like 200 targets and finish like wide receiver 22 or something. And that would be such a terrible outcome in so many ways. But it's just,
I think he would like physically break before he got 200 targets.
And we've even talked about like their run game. I mean, it's going to be next to non-existent. We have people hyping Tyrone Tracy, Eric Gray, and
Devin Singletary.
We're back to Devin Singletary, who in a way better offensive system was RB31 last year. Like it's just the path to this offense being good. I said this earlier, but this could be the worst skill position group in the NFC. Them and the Patriots are really fighting. The only thing they have over the Patriots is Malik Neighbors is far and above better than any wide receiver the Patriots has.
Maybe we should do a show where we try and predict the worst and best offenses and see how far off we are by the end of the season.
The Athletic just did that, which is why I bring that up so much. They did it for the AFC today.
I feel like I would just like written records so we can go back and see, okay, did we really know anything? Were we on the right track as far as situations go? Would be curious as we look back year over year. Okay, is there anybody else you want to bring up just real quick before we get to the mock draft here?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just bring up Kyren Williams. Like, we're both not low on him, but this guy was the RB4 in just 12 games last year and led the league, or was third in the league in rushing in 12 games. And was the only running back other than CMC who averaged more than 20 points a game. And if it wasn't for some of the Blake Corum talk and the injuries, Kyren Williams would be like a lock in the top like 6 picks of any draft at this point.
And honestly, not for me, maybe for like, you know, the consensus general public. For me, I can't really explain it, but I think you'll know what I mean when I say this. When I just watching what he did last year, it's not that it was unimpressive, because that's not what I want to say with this, but it was one of those things that while I was watching it, I was telling myself, okay, no matter what, there is no way this guy is doing this again next year. It just feels like one of those outlier career years, even though it was his first year.
Well, and the other concern is just Sean McVay seems to be like a running back whisperer. I remember what he like redid with CJ Anderson for a period of our fantasy lives. And then obviously all the stars between, he had Cam Akers as somebody I really loved for a while. And then Todd Gurley obviously broke fantasy for a couple of years.
So what you're saying is I should still keep Zach Evans on my taxi squad.
I mean, if there's I just can't, I don't know about that one, Evan. I think, you know, Where there's a will, there's a way. So maybe Evan.
Okay, are we ready for the mock draft here?
Yes, sir.
Alrighty, Johnny, you're about to be kicked off the screen. If you have anything to say it now. All right, we're good to go. With that being said, let's get right into it. Dalton, let me open the tab over here. I am pick number 4. You are pick number 10. This is half point scoring. I put it 13 rounds, no quarterback and kicker necessary. Unless you just want to pick those, you can go ahead and do so. Otherwise, let's get started here. Can you see it okay on the screen? Didn't even ask.
Yeah, it looks good.
All righty. So CMC one. Wow, Amon-Ra St. Brown number 2 already off the sleeper is wild with some of the ADPs on here. So can I do something that I would have taken you aback if we hadn't already done receiver rankings?
Oh, you're going to take Jamar Chase here?
Yeah, and we didn't even talk about this on the ranks. We'll get into this more later in the offseason, but I have Jamar Chase as my number 1 receiver this year. I feel like with T. Higgins obviously still in the fold, and then oh my god, I'm blanking. This is terrible. I'm blanking on the rookie's name who is literally on my dynasty team with Jermaine Burton. Thank you, in the fold. I think that we're gonna see Jamar Chase be able to move in the slot a little bit more this year, and I think that is going to be very helpful, and also obviously, hopefully, a healthy Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree with that sentiment. I would say with the top 4 wide receivers, you could rank them anyway, but Sleeper decided to throw Amon St. Brown as the wide receiver 1. Yeah. I would probably leave him out of that top 4 conversation.
I have him actually ahead of Justin Jefferson on my ranks.
I think Justin Jefferson is more talented, but I understand the situation.
Yep.
I'm pretty bummed here because there seems to be a running back run all of a sudden, and I was going to take a running back. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm taking AJ Brown here. It's pretty easy for me to run this one.
Yeah.
Kellen Moore is like a not pretty like heavily talked about improvement to the Eagles play calling.
Yeah.
It was pretty terrible for their offense down the line last year. And AJ Brown is a world-beating receiver. He was on track to almost beat the receiving record over the course of like 8 weeks last year, where he had 100 yards in multiple back-to-back games. So I feel pretty comfortable in taking him here and betting a little bit on the Eagles rebounding. I think the end of their season left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths.
Yes, and fairly so. Okay, your next pick. So Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison, Puka Nacua, and Kyron Williams have gone between your last pick and your pick now.
I'm just going to say, I know it's a mock. Marvin Harrison going above Puka Nacua, who broke every rookie receiving record last year, is an absurd, and it's almost in line with ADP, so it's not like you don't see that happen. I still highly disagree with that.
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison's ceiling is Puka Nacua, so just draft the guy who did it. Pretty easy here. I've been all in on the Colts for a long time.
Yeah, I was going to say, either Taylor or Jonathan Taylor or Saquon, you had 2 great options at running back.
Right? Yeah, and I'm taking Jonathan Taylor because I think Anthony Richardson's going to take that offense to the moon. They have what is going on?
Sam LaPorta at 2-8.
Oh, but yeah, they're going to take it to the moon. I'm pretty confident that there's going to be a lot of RPOs in this offense that really work in Taylor's favor. They got one snap together last year, a lot better.
So, I mean, I have Josh Jacobs as my RB7. I believe he and Etienne are my next 2 guys up. I almost want to go Etienne and see if I could get Jacobs come back around to me, but I think I'll just go with the safety of Josh Jacobs right here and see what happens on this turn.
Oh, there goes Etienne.
Etienne gone. Devon Achane.
Honestly, him going in the 3rd round feels a lot better than where I've seen him going in some underdog drafts.
It feels tame compared to, LaPorta 2-8 and Harrison 112.
It does. I would pick Achane 112 over Harrison.
This is wild to look like. I'm talking about being afraid I'm wrong about Malik Neighbors at wide receiver 36. He is 35 overall on this board. I'm not quite that afraid.
The rookie landing spots are absurd for their value right now.
So I think I'm down to Deebo Samuel or DJ Moore, and I'm honestly struggling to remember who I have higher. Let me double check that real quick. So I have DJ Moore 15, Debo Samuel 13. That's kind of what I thought. I feel safer going with DJ Moore. That might sound stupid because it's the Bears rookie quarterback, but I don't know.
Do you
Like
really want to pair Debo with Josh Jacobs and their injury histories?
that's fair, but this is also just a mock draft, so I don't have to worry about that. Just like building best team here. I think I'm gonna go Debo. DJ Moore goes next. Pittman. Those are
I was really hoping for Travis Kelce.
I know. I thought you might get Kelsey.
I mean, like I was talking about how I wanted to take one running back and then I was going to go kind of wide receiver heavy, but this board's really landing in a way that's favorable.
Yeah.
It's going to be Derrick Henry here. Gus Edwards had like 15 touchdowns from the 1 yard line. There's no world where I don't see Derrick Henry having a good level of touchdowns.
And if we get the Ravens out of the pistol a lot this year, like that's going to be good for Derrick Henry.
Yeah. And him going past some of these guys like Achane and Kyron Williams, I just can't get on board with. Derrick Henry's my RB4 and Jonathan Taylor's my RB3. So drafting from my board, I'm really doing what I want to do here.
Yeah. So Rashad White off the board, probably not too sad about that. Pacheco may have been a gut punch. You could have really loaded up on running back. Mahomes and Devontae Smith off the board as well.
So just playing off my rankings again here, I have Jalen Waddle as my wide receiver 18. I think last year he just kind of didn't hit gold, and like he a lot of just like unlucky opportunity for him.
Yeah,
I'm still a believer in Jalen Waddle and how he fits in that offense. I think he's going to do significantly better than Malik Neighbors. And then next on my list probably would have been DK, who I'm a little excited about this year. But
yeah,
I think Jalen Waddle is a good pick here.
I really wanted DK to follow me. No Malik Neighbors. Don't have to worry about that. I don't really like this first handful of names I'm looking at. Let's give it a scroll. This is where it gets pretty rough, in my opinion. I'm looking at like Cooper Kupp, Trey McBride, Joe Mixon, who I
think if you scroll down a little bit, you'll be pleasantly surprised. Oh, you passed him. Well,
I mean, T. Higgins, obviously, always one of my guys. Kenneth Walker is another one. You know what? I mean, what is a mock draft if not for trying stuff, right? Let's just take Dalton Kincaid and see how this team ends up. Because Kincaid, we kind of touched on it last week a little bit. I think he should be ahead of McBride, and I think he is very much on the list of guys who have, tight end 1 overall upside this year.
Yeah, I thought you'd go Zay there, so I'm a little surprised, but
I thought he might come back around. Wow, tight end run.
Yeah.
Pitts and McBride. Mark Andrews is tight end 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, tight end 6 on the board right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of an absurd take.
I probably should have just taken him, but I really just wanted to take Kincaid so I could talk about him for a second. I mean, do I just go with the Bengals funnel and just go T. Higgins, Jamar Chase here? Like, I'm also thinking I only have one running back. When I go, although I don't know how you felt, but when I go later in these drafts, I have drafted a lot of running backs I like in the 8th, 9th, 10th rounds.
Well, and that's why I wanted to go like a hero running back build here, but drafting off my board, I have Taylor and Henry so high, I can't discount it.
Yeah, like I think based on my board, I should take Kenneth Walker. However, he was almost on my list of players I'm worried I'm wrong about, and but I don't want to go 2 Bengals. I really don't want to do that. What else are we looking at receiver here? It's really gotten pretty tough. I guess I just have to go Kenneth Walker. I kind of wanted to see what the running backs would look like if I went a little more receiver heavy, but that's okay.
Well, I feel like on receiver there, part of the issue is it gets really flat for a while. And you can see the same argument for a lot of guys, which is why this is one of my favorite draft picks of all of fantasy.
I mean, you're taking Anthony Richardson right here.
We're taking Anthony Richardson here. The guy is, if he plays a full healthy season, he could be the Exodia of fantasy football. I mean, he could break fantasy scoring records. I'll say it. I'll take it now. I'm going to draft him here. Him and Jonathan Taylor are going to get a lot of touchdowns together. And my favorite part about this is I have Christian Kirk coming right back to me, who I'm really excited about as a wide receiver 3 on this team in a flex play. He's going to get so many targets because he is the one player on this team who has a clear and defined role. There's no competition between him and Brian Thomas and what they do. Gabe Davis was an addition, and it's really him and Evan Ingram fighting for those targets over the middle. So I like that. The offensive line is terrible in Jacksonville, so I like those short route players, and I can't see an argument against him here.
Yeah, I think Christian Kirk is probably one of my favorite values so far.
You're above him on me. You have him at 29. I have him at 32.
Yeah, he was under consideration at 5'4" for me. So to get him at 6'3", I definitely love the value there. Okay, to give the audio listeners a bit of a recap, which, by the way, if you're listening to this on the podcast, if you can, I would consider going to watch this on YouTube. It's a lot better experience. You can actually see the draft board and see all of the people who are being picked. But right now we are at, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tight ends off the board through, a little over 6.5 rounds. And we just had Joe Burrow go off the board. So we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 quarterbacks also off the board here. And, sometimes things just work out in funny ways. We're going to go with the guy I just argued as a potential top 12 running back, Ramondre Stevenson, in the 6th round. And, that almost worked out perfectly. I really wanted Jaden Reed to come back around to me at 7-4. That's pretty devastating. Oh, man. See, I feel like in the drafts that I've done this year, I end up in these spots where I just keep liking the running backs, which is a strange thing. It's not usually how it goes for me.
There are so many old, better running backs going late because of their age.
Yeah, like if I take a running back here, which I kind of want to, and probably I have to scroll for him, it is I already lost him. I want to take Zach Moss here. I know if you weren't in this draft, there's a chance he could come back around to 8-10. Maybe he will anyway. But I think I will go with the safety of Chris Godwin because I'll be feeling a little bad about my receivers if I wait another round and a half to get one. But I really wanted to take Zach Moss right there.
Well, I really like Chris Godwin this year. He was a 1,000-yard receiver last year. He ran dry with touchdowns, but you get the touchdowns in, and suddenly he's back up in consideration for being a lot better. So I don't hate the pick at all. I think it's a good call.
Yeah, and they have the rookie guy. I am just on a horrendous roll of names. They have a rookie receiver who
Jalen
McMillan, who seemingly is going to make it so Godwin can actually move around and be a little bit of outside, a little bit of inside. And that, I think, will be good for his fantasy value this year.
I mean, again, if I'm going off my ranks here, this is a guy I have ranked above Christian Kirk, but I know I can get him later. It's also a player I've loved for his entire career. You got to scroll a bit to even get him on the draft board, but it's kind of take your guys here. But I'm taking Deontay Johnson.
Yep.
I think he's one of the latest round players who could pace for over 120 targets this year.
Yep.
And with what they did with Adam Thielen in that offense, I'm just all on board for what can be done there. It's really run dry at tight end in here. I don't like Jake Ferguson. I'm going to need a tight end eventually.
At this point, you just wait, probably.
Yeah, this is definitely where you wait. There's nobody here worth taking. Zamir White doesn't intrigue me at all on the board. Nick Chubb, I'm not buying until I get some camp reports. Lad McConkey is like a poor man's Christian Kirk for me right now. Same player, same archetype, worse situation. But if you scroll a little bit here, I love Zach Moss here, Evan. I'm not taking him because I actually have Jaylen Warren ranked a little higher than him, and I like major improvements to that Steelers offensive line. They took tackle, and then they took Zach Frazier, and they instituted a run-heavy Arthur Smith. So I think the Jaylen Warren case is easy to be made here. Him and Najee Harris being that close makes a lot of sense to me. I think they're going to split a lot of work, and he'll get the passing down work in an offense where, like we talked about earlier with Pickens, it should be a lot of profit for him on that.
Yeah. I really wanted to take Jonathan Brooks here, which sounds counterintuitive with where I have him in ADP. But I'm feeling pretty good at this point. with Jacobs, Kenneth Walker, and Ramondre Stevenson, where I'm okay taking that shot right now as Brooks is my RB4. But with that said, I mean, unless I missed him, I think Zach Moss is still on the board.
He is definitely still on the board, isn't he? Yeah, he should be.
Yep. Just have to keep scrolling. Like I just think that Zach Moss is so undervalued right now on some of these ADP sites. He's not going to walk into the same volume that Joe Mixon had, but he's going to walk into more volume and red zone touches than he's had for a whole season, maybe in his entire career. And he was very good when given those chances for large chunks of last season.
Yeah, and he's one of the most efficient running backs running out of shotgun. The Colts were first in shotgun runs. The Bengals were second last year. Like, it's going to be a 1-to-1 translation as far as scheme fit.
Man, let me tell you, I feel really bad. Every time I look at the board and want to take a receiver, I just feel bad about it. This is not. I'm glad I took, because I almost went Breece Hall round 1. I'm glad I took Chase round 1.
I mean, that would have been a little ugly looking at what you're looking at. I mean, Keon Coleman going as high as he's going is still kind of a head scratcher for me.
Yeah, I just need to go to receiver here. Like, yep, I think it's got to be Curtis Samuel. Like, I don't feel good.
City.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I got running back with the Bengals. I don't feel great about doing it, but like I think Samuel's a pretty solid player. I think the two most likely guys to be the top target those two and Shakir, but I think I'd favor Samuel as far as maybe not target getter, but maybe just like overall production. I think I have maybe the two most productive pass catchers for Josh Allen right now.
Yeah. And I think buying into an offense where the quarterback's going to produce no matter what, I'm with. And he's reuniting with Joe Brady, who coached him to a career year with Carolina. Yeah. So definitely like a narrative there. I'm really going to show my type here because I'm taking another running back. It's the same type of player as Jaylen Warren, a player that you and I both have ranked highly above consensus, but I'm going to take Tajay Spears here. Again, improvements to the offensive line and the play calling. It's the same narrative that we're even giving with Jaylen Warren. I like the value on getting him late.
I also didn't even realize he was still on the board.
That is rough.
I mean, I could have taken him instead of Moss maybe, but I think that's pretty close to a wash. But yeah, he's just so far down ADP, I forget he's still on the board. So always check. I mean, obviously, it's a little bit different in the live mock drafts, but always check your board, kids.
Yeah, and at this point, I'm probably done with running back on this team. I feel comfortable with everybody I have and going to start taking like shots at receiver. Unfortunately, the shot I'm taking was the 30-year-old receiver who I will continue to say is underrated every year.
Yeah, it's Tyler Lockett.
It's Tyler Lockett. Again, you and I have him ranked way above where he's going in ADP. I don't see how Jameson Williams outdoes Tyler Lockett this year without major improvements to like every aspect to his game. So I'm fine taking Tyler Lockett here and really filling out that wide receiver room with some good players.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that with Tyler Lockett. I again think he is underrated, just like he is every year. Like, he wasn't as good last year. We've seen the drop off happen slowly but surely. But you're talking about getting him in the 10th round, which is just crazy.
Yeah, and they added a pass-heavy offensive coordinator, like with Ryan Grubb. I like where it's going.
I mean, I don't really like doing this, but I don't have a quarterback, and I think Justin Herbert is being underrated this year. I know the situation not ideal. I still think this is a very good player.
Yeah, I would take him. Jaden Daniels is right next to him. I'd take him over him. I mean, yeah, at this point, you're going late round, but you're really betting on talent, and you're also betting on a really good coach who's never averaged less than 25 points a game in a season in Harbaugh. I know he's been out of the league in a while, but still, there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, and just looking at the rest of the board here, like, had I not already taken Kenneth Walker, I'm actually probably looking at Zach Charbonnet here, and that shouldn't preclude you. Like, if you want to take a running back that you like and he's the backup for your starter, like, this isn't best ball. I wouldn't worry so much about that. But with that said, I still don't feel great about I have Chase, Debo, Godwin, and Curtis Samuel right now. Would love to add another receiver I feel good about. Oh, no. Oh, my God. I really thought Jacoby Myers was still going to be there for me next, but I was so confident I didn't even look. You know what? With that said, I think we just go Josh Downs and hope that the second most talented receiver on this team right now is Josh Downs, because I think it still very well could be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little confused about the ADPs in redraft being Adonai Mitchell over Josh Downs. This is a player who almost cleared 1,000 yards, and he had a high target rate on RPOs in the 4 games with Anthony Richardson, and he only got better as the season went on. I like some of AD Mitchell's game, but
I will say with Mitchell, I could see a very wide range of scenarios this year. I could see him being very good very quickly because he is that gifted athletically and just as a receiver. I could also see the adjustment from pros to college being big for him, and I could see him having a real dud half a season to a season because he is just trying to find himself and trying to learn how to be a pro and put in effort on a play in, play out basis.
Yeah, and I could definitely see that being the case. For me, this is kind of a get your guys moment. Evan and I pretty consistently agreed the top 2 Green Bay wide receivers were Reed and Wicks, and Wicks is going all the way down at 165. I'm taking him highly above ADP here. I just want to get him knowing you're in this draft as well as you like him as well. But Quentin Johnston is going above Dontavian Wicks.
Yeah.
Dontavian Wicks had a better season last year and had more competition to do it and is in a better offense right now than what I would translate to what the Chargers have.
Mm-hmm.
So all in on that one. Still, I mean, again, I have 2 picks left. This is going to be a tight end punt team. I'm just not going to take one until the last pick of the draft because there's still more value out there. Actually, I'm so wrong. Another player both you and I have ranked highly above ADP. I love Pratt Freiermuth here. Probably the second receiving option in this offense. Yeah. Has a high touchdown upside in their red zone work. And I don't see why he's going this late. I mean, he is, at least the 12th or 13th tight end off this board.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he and that's his ADP is tight end 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there. Oh, man. Sometimes I really feel like the fantasy football gods have a sense of humor, and you can't show me J.K. Dobbins' name on the screen in the 12th round and not expect me to take the bait.
Oh, man. I mean,
should I have taken Kendre Miller? Yes, I probably should have, but that was a very excited, wide-eyed moment.
Kendre Miller was a guy I'm excited about, but if J.K. Dobbins hits, he's going to hit really hard.
That's what they say. I could go with the Quentin Johnston stack. Have him and Justin Herbert. I don't, so I won't. I think I'm just going to go Josh Palmer, the other guy in town, who I know that there are, he should not be your wide receiver 1, probably not your 2. He might end up being that. And I don't know, if you told somebody a year ago that there was going to be no Mike Williams, no Keenan Allen, they would never have thought that Josh Palmer would be 150 overall in ADP heading into the season. I think we've gone a little bit too far the other way with Palmer because he's not the player that people hoped maybe he could be. He's still okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. And he could be the number 1 target getter on that offense.
Yeah.
Not to discount Lad McConkey, but we've seen Palmer do more than we have with Lad.
Yeah.
Here, I'm looking at my team. This is the last player you draft. And in my opinion, when you draft your last player, you know that once the season starts, if they don't perform, you can cut them. It's over. We're moving on. So you want to take somebody who, if they hit week 1, you suddenly have a high value on your hand. In my opinion, it's a guy we both have ranked in our top 60. It's a guy we both talked positively about. And it's a player who has a real quick path to succeeding in the NFL. So I'm taking Jermaine Burton here.
Yeah.
And because some of the other names on this list, I don't really want to draft a Quentin Johnston or even a Brandon Cooks. You're making a weird argument for upside. Troy Franklin going above him is a little weird to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm happy to take a player who I think could end up being good for me. And if I'm wrong about him, I'm not losing much because what I missed was a player that I can get off waivers in week 3.
Well, and if you don't need to make a move on him early in the season, if there are a few examples of wide receiver handcuffs every year. Not necessarily a 1-for-1. He will step into this role if this happens. But I do think if something were to happen to either of those top two receivers, Burton would probably be a top 36 ranked receiver in weekly ranks this year.
Yeah. And like the only argument against Burton is that Mike Gesicki becomes a thing again. Like that's really the only path preventing him. Andre Iosivas is the other wide receiver he's fighting for time with. Jermaine Burton was a guy a lot of scouts had a first round grade on and like a round 6 character score on, and that's really why he fell. And he still went higher than people like Ian Rappaport thought he was going to go in that draft.
I was about to ask you final thoughts as we wrap this up. I'm looking at Team 6 and glaring at them and noticing they're the reason why I don't have like any of the wide receivers I really want. As you get to the mid rounds, their first 6 picks, all wide receivers: Tyreek Hill, Brandon Ayuk, Michael Pittman, DK Metcalf, Keenan Allen, Terry McLaurin. Their first running back is Trey Benson, Brian Robinson, Ezekiel Elliott. That is the entirety of that running back room. But my final thoughts with this are kind of the same as the couple of underdog drafts I've done. And it's interesting because I really thought that was more of a best ball trend, but maybe this is just kind of how it is on fantasy boards this year, where there are more running backs that maybe I'm wrong, but there are more running backs that I want to take the shot on in the 6th, 7th, 8th round than receivers, because the drop off at running back after that I think is more severe. And that, I look at my team, like Chris Godwin is my wide receiver 3. I don't hate that, but I feel a lot better about Ramondre Stevenson as my running back 3,
Yeah, and I mean, looking at this draft, it feels like you have to hit wide receiver early because just some values coming out of this, in my opinion. You have Najee Harris at 8-1, which I think he gets a lot of hate on Fade's Twitter. At that price tag, it's something that's easy to stomach. You have, I mean, Jerome Ford at 11-9, who's going to likely start for the Browns week 1 and likely play for a while. You have Javonte Williams at 8-11, who is another player who should be getting the starter work.
Well, even
Miller,
like Zach Charbonnet, 12-1.
Yeah. Yeah, and Kendre Miller, 12-11. And
Yeah.
we don't know who's playing behind Alvin Kamara. And even like, I know it's my pick, so I don't want to like glaze it, but Derrick Henry at 310, like last year, everybody kept saying, imagine Derrick Henry in this Ravens offense. And then it happens, and nobody seems to care. And same thing with Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
Like, he ends up in the best offense he's ever been on, and nobody seems to care. And I
know
like,
Josh Jacobs at 2-9, my own pick.
Yeah.
And even even Travis Etienne at 2-11.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have, I mean, DeAndre Swift at 6'10" is just like disgusting to me. I'm going to be completely honest on that one. James Conner at 5'11" seems like a really good value. Yeah. Pacheco at 312. Like, I really feel like the takeaway here for me is like you want to hammer wide receiver early because of how heavy it's becoming in the value-based drafting schemes.
Yeah, but like with that said, I look at some of the early picks and the values that I don't like are the receivers for the most. Like, I don't like Laporta at 2.8, but I don't like Harrison at 112. I think everyone probably knows that. I love Chris Olave, and like order of receiver ranks, this isn't, much different or any different than what I have him. I don't like he's at 2.6. Mm-hmm. I would take Jacobs and Etienne and like probably like Derrick Henry and Pacheco, like, other guys that went later in the 3rd. I would take some of those running backs, I think, before Olave, at least 2 or 3 of those guys. And like Drake London at 210, that again, that's a little bit higher than I have him in my ranks. But even just like looking at some of those running backs, there are some receivers who are going earlier than I think they should, just in the overall ranks right now.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know I said like the last pick doesn't matter. I really feel like Ben Sinnott being drafted in this is a little absurd. And like some other players that go in this draft, like I like the Jalen Wright pick. I don't see Raheem Mostert going off the board unless I'm missing him somewhere. But
I mean, he's 7.8.
Oh, okay. Well, that's too high for Mostert. I take that back. Sorry about that. But then you look at like team 9, and that's like a terrible RB heavy start in my opinion. I mean, their wide receiver 1 is Jordan Addison, Lad McConkey, Jamison Williams, Mike Williams. Like, it's a pretty disastrous like wide receiver core that
Yeah.
team has, and can kind of be the inverse of what we're talking about, where if you hammer RB early too quickly, you're going to really end up in a bad spot. I mean, Mike Williams and Rashid Shaheed as their wide receiver 4 and 5 is not a good start for that draft.
Yeah, no, completely agree. It is going to be really interesting how the ADPs of receivers kind of shakes out as time goes on. I think this is a good kind of time capsule for us to look back on maybe at the end of July, beginning of August, and just kind of see how things have shaken out at that point. And with that said, that is going to do it for episode 142 of the Half Point Per Podcast. Give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Half Point Per Pod. Subscribe to the show on the YouTube at Half Point Per Podcast. Link to all those things in the show notes. As always, the show is available anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all of that. If you want to get the full mock draft experience tonight, I would again go back at about the 35-minute mark, watch it so you can see the draft board unfold. I'll tweet the draft board out with the episode tomorrow, so you can go back and look at that if you want to do it that way as well. Leave us a 5-star review anywhere you listen to your podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you again next week.